We are going to call this meeting to order. It is 2:32 p.m. on this Thursday, April 2nd of 2012. This is the Technical Advisory Committee meeting for AMATS. And before I do anything, I'm going to do roll call. Mr. Rebecca?
Present.
Mr. Morgan?
Here.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
Mr. Hanson and Ms. Epstein are not with us yet. Mr. Morris?
Here.
Ms. Wood's not with us. Ms. Marmello is here. Ms. Howe? Here. Mr. Wilbur?
Here.
We do have quorum. All right. Craig, if you mind.
Sure. AMATS meetings are all public meetings. The public is invited to comment. Everyone in the room is regular, so you already know that, but we'll have a business item with a presentation by staff or consultants, and then the committee will discuss it, and then the public will be given comments.
Thank you. All right. The next item is approval of the agenda. And we have a couple of minor modifications. I've been told that we could swap item 6B and 6A for the informational items. Just the annual summary report on air quality will come before the public transportation route changes. And then also, I was going to make the recommendation of, we have no action items on the 2035 MPP. We wanted to move that down as our first informational item as well. Anybody?
Item 5B goes with 5A, so you can move both of those.
If there are no action items on either. The record shows Ms. Bay joined us. All right, are there any other changes or modifications to the agenda? Do I hear an approval?
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second. Any opposed? All right, moved by Ms. Wilbur, second by myself. Hearing none opposed, we are so moved. So that we have no minutes, item 4, we have no minutes to approve this time. So we'll give a status update from the staff member.
Status update. I was gone for a while, and because I tried to play soccer, and so now I get on it as soon as now they're back.
So that's what that means.
That's what I mean.
Thank you. So next
We'll get
month.
caught up, yeah.
All right, so moving right along, we'll now start with the business items. And since A and B are down, that means we are starting with the AMATS operating agreement.
Okay, so as most folks probably know, this is the operating agreement that governs how we do stuff and why we're in existence, et cetera, signed by the governor and the mayor in 2001, I believe, when this one was signed. And we have a number of relatively minor changes to this creature. I can go through them one by one as we start, but basically there are a lot of things that used to be a 3-year update cycle, they're now a 4-year update cycle. We used to have the LRTP, we have the LRTP, we used to have minor amendments and major amendments, and now we have administrative modification amendments. So those are a lot of the changes that are in there. In addition, we added a freight advisory committee into here, we added the bike and pedestrian advisory committee into here, so those kind of things are all in here. If we want to go through this, I can go through that pretty quickly. I think not hit most of them I just mentioned, but let's just go through it and I'll break it down. So, page 3, you'll see that there's the definition for administrative modification in there. If you go down a little farther, you'll see it talks about the air quality advisory. It used to be called the group.
Well, I don't know, it got switched.
Yeah, the bylaws for that say the air quality advisory committee.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess you may know, Cindy may know, I don't know why it got called group at some point versus committee, but the bylaws say the committee, so it seems to make sense to me that it should be called the committee. Everyone refers to it as the committee. So that's why I changed that there.
Okay, let the record show Ms. Epstein joined us at 2:36 p.m.
Okay, so a little farther down, you'll see amendment again. Again, this has to do with, we used to have a minor amendment, major amendment, et cetera, et cetera. This is all part of that. Now we just have administrative modifications and amendments. That's that page. Page 4, you'll see we added bike and ped, we added the freight advisory committee, we got LRTP, we got major amendments added in LRTP. There are a number of places in here as well where Bart went through and double checked all the different rules and regulations and made sure the numbers, the references, the citations were updated. That's page 4, page 5, this one, taking that again. He updated the language on STIP, we updated the language on TIP. So that's page 5. Page 6, just updated some of the language on PWP. 5.2, halfway down at the bottom of page 6 there, where it's talking about the AMATS policy committee. That language was added at some point by the assembly, where they actually talked about the ability for the assembly members to designate an alternate if they could not make the meeting. And that was in between the 2001 operating agreement and now, so that's what that language shows there. Page 7, just giving some of those acronyms, language. Page 8, sort of the same, MPPs. Page 9, you'll see at the top there, that box there is where we are showing all the changes that occurred with the reorganization in the municipalities. There's no longer a traffic department, there's no longer a planning department, just updating those so they are current.
Greg, on that page, yes, in the middle of that block, you know, say chair of the TAC will be the traffic engineer. Instead of municipality director of traffic, to be consistent with the word. You see that?
Yeah, I see that.
I guess I am still the director of traffic, though.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Just not a traffic department.
Department.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still
Thank you.
I'm the director of the traffic.
I think
division. Although it's technically I'm the deputy director, but. still the
If
director
it
of
works,
traffic.
Stephanie, if this works and it's accurate, don't change it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's page 9. Page 10, the discussion on the AMATS Air Quality Advisory Committee instead of group. At the bottom is where, page 10, at the bottom of page 10 is where we added the Freight Advisory Committee, page 11, the Freight and Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Page 12, we're updating from long-range transportation plan to that long transportation plan, and some of the 3-year cycles to the 4-year cycles. Page 13, more of all that sort of stuff. Page 14, we've added in the language on administrative modification, and then it looks all sorts of different colors there because I think in between the first time we did it, they must have changed some language, so, or updated it a little bit more there. Bottom of page 14, you see some changes in the UPWP language just related to the air quality and freight committee, et cetera. Page 15, in the middle of section, says section 8.1. We just have the language in there that says no RFPs can be issued until FHWA has approved the scope of work. It was an extra step. It would just take a little bit longer for doing an RFP. It would go to DOT and they'd approve it, and then they'd send it down to FHWA and they'd approve it, and FHWA said, we don't really need to approve those. DOT looks at them and approves it, and we're good to go. So that saves us a chunk of time to take that out, and they're okay with that. So that's page 15. Page 16 is where we talk about quarterly reports. We extended the times where these reports are due. These quarterly reports have all sorts of narrative that we prepare, along with financial stuff that comes out of the accounting group downtown. The last time DOT did an audit, not DOT planning, or some group, I don't know what the group is called, but they did an audit. Internal review, okay, so there was some extra information given related to specifically to staff time and how much my staff spent on each task. DOT looked at that and said, you know, that really helps us when we do the quarterly reports. Could you add that in? It takes a chunk more time to do that stuff. It's extra work on behalf of our admin folks, and we just couldn't get it in the turnaround time of the usual 23rd day, so we added 15 days, or it's business day, so, or that's calendar day, so actual time is about 2 work weeks for our staff to get it done. Same reports, et cetera, just giving us more time to get that work done. That's what those time frames are at. Nothing on page 17, like 18, page 19, the section 14, just updating some of the language from the Code of Federal Regulations. And that appears to be it. So, you can see pretty much, those are not real substantive changes, but cleaning up language to make it consistent with current regulations, current organization of the municipality, and current committees that we have here at AMATS. So, been working on this a while. Happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Morris?
I think this one, Air Quality Advisory Group,
What page?
on page 7, the very first.
There it is. Thank you, sir.
I apologize if this was covered right before I came in, but in terms of amendment, it talks about a major change in project costs or design concept, and I was looking to see if you define that. And I know we sort of have a rule of thumb, right, in terms of percentage of costs that we've been using. I'm wondering whether that should be better defined, because that's sort of what determines whether there's public involvement or not.
Well, we have defined in our policies and procedures what we call the trigger events, where it talks about different levels that we can do. This is specifically the federal language where it says, this is what we consider a major amendment. I don't know that the feds care who makes the decision, whether it's the TAC or the policy committee, but we, AMATS itself, has defined at some point certain percentages and certain dollar figures on where they are comfortable. This was AMATS policy committee many years ago, decided where they are comfortable with who gets to make the decision. This in here is just the federal language that talks about what the difference between an amendment and an administrative modification is. So that's why we included it that way. We didn't get, I figure we still have our policies and procedures which dictate who AMATS thinks should make that decision, but we didn't think it was necessary.
Craig, when you took out major amendment definition on 4, which has a little more detail, was it meant to be replaced by amendment?
Yeah, now, we used to have a major amendment and a minor amendment.
Right.
Now we just have an amendment and an administrative modification. So we don't have a major and minor amendment, we just have amendments and administrative modifications. Amendments are the ones that require a public process. They require to go through P&Z and the assembly and all that sort of stuff. Administrative modifications can just be approved by the technical committee, depending on the level, so. That's why there's just an amendment.
I guess the concern I'm raising, and I can't think where we've ever had this issue come up before, but I'm anticipating in the future, there may be some sort of change that falls into a gray area where it's not clear one way or the other, and I'm wondering whether we need a better definition about what an amendment is, and at least major amendments says, you know, gives some criteria.
Yeah, and again, this language in here regarding major amendments that was the old federal language, so.
And this is the FHWA definition for amendments. And then
I'm just thinking we're
specifics would be in
losing,
the
I
policies and
understand, but I
procedures.
think we're losing something by some of that language and maybe moving it to.
Well, I guess my thought is we're still governed by the policies and procedures which say when you can do what the time frame is, and dollar figures and all that sort of stuff. But that's up to you folks. It's just the staff suggestion. Happy to do it.
Where are those policy and procedures? I don't think I've seen them.
Well, sir, I better get you a copy of them. They are on our website, and I can certainly get you a copy. They were voted on shortly after I got here. I don't know when they first were adopted or when they were worked on after that, but
5, isn't there?
yeah.
They're defined in that, you know, administrative modification certainly deals with parameters of what is a minor versus a major modification. So, as long as the policy and procedures cover it.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
Just a point of clarification, Craig, that, and I appreciate that these are identified as an errata sheet because it's not the intent that we're gonna have to get anything re-signed, that the AMATS technical and policy committees can accept these changes without them being, without constituting an entire
New redesignation and signatures by the governor and the mayor and all that sort of stuff. These are relatively minor amendments. Well, I mean, the section that talks about amendments and says this agreement may be amended in writing, must be done, be approved by the policy committee, etc. So it's not a new designation, it's a new NPO, or all that sort of stuff for the new operating agreement. You weren't on the last one. I don't know how. That was a full, yeah, you wrote this one. We changed it a little bit.
Are there any questions or comments on the public? Please identify yourself.
My name is Ann Brooks, and I worked on your public participation plan update, and it was a really interesting exercise to dig into the operating agreement and then discover policies and procedures. And if you're amending this, it would be really nice for anyone like trying to understand how you operate, if you at least reference your policies and procedures somehow in this and make a tie, so that the public can get the full picture of how you do your business. That's one comment. The other comment, I guess, is more of a question. If we're making this change, why don't we also add a freight rep and a bike ped rep to this body? It would still give you an uneven number, and we recognize one of the committees is represented on this body, but then we have two new committees. I think bike ped is one of those things, every decision you made has some influence on bike ped, and certainly on freight. So that's just a question from an outsider.
I was going to say, that's the question I asked, if you add more bodies to the technical advisory committee, would that be a major?
My guess is that would be a little bit more harsher than a change, but an expert. I know my understanding, it used to be there were 3 members of the policy committee, and one of them was the air quality person. The air quality is the big, I mean, that's the big hammer here. So that's why Lois is here as a member of the air quality committee. It's the big item, and that's been around for a long time. So, but I mean, I'm not an expert at that.
So additionally, Mr. Hansen should be able to speak on, or at least for a great part of the PED issues, since the function is in the Public Works Department.
And Steve carries boxes, right? So that's great.
But our focus on freight is in a very limited geographical area. I think the context here is within the grand scheme of the highway and road system.
Yeah,
I know you.
I guess I'd respond, Jerry, to your comment that all of us can speak to a lot of different issues, but and I hadn't thought of what Ann suggested before she raised it, but that we do have these committees and they're supposed to be advisory, and potentially the TAC could benefit from someone that has a little more intimate knowledge of the issues.
I don't disagree with that. I think I've seen it function fairly well when Lori presents for the bike issues. She works with the Department of Public Works. They're structured together. The committee probably is appropriate. I'm just not sure we need additional committee members of the TAC.
I'd be happy to try and look into it and see if adding members to one of the standing committees, policy or technical committee, constitutes anything major, whatever. Find out, see if folks in positions of power, I think they'll do anything that's the same. We can always come back and amend this again. It's just up to the TAC and the policy committee to adopt. It doesn't have a process that goes through the assembly, so it's not super time consuming. We could do this now and then add members later if we wanted to.
Yeah, that was my question, is can we take care of this errata amount to update it and then possibly come back to add some of those if they are good suggestions. Other questions or comments from the committee?
Should we try and get Ann's first point, which seems pretty simple, incorporated?
If you guys want me to add language in here about the policies and procedures, we can figure out where to talk about it. this is kind of an overarching agreement that governs how this creature runs, and the policies and procedures are more of the day-to-day. If you're adding this much to the construction project, who gets to approve that change and all that sort of stuff. So,
How were the policies and procedures adopted previously?
by the policy committee.
So they were developed by the TAC and approved by the policy committee?
Some of them were approved by the policy, set up, directed by, set up because of direction from the policy.
My personal feeling is I think they should be referenced in this document here. If, they actually gone through the process that recognized by the policy committee, prepared by AAC, that they're really an integral part of it.
Follow-up question. If we wait to approve this until we can add the additional references to policy, procedure, and possibly do some research on advising, adding people to this, is this gonna hold up anything? I mean, is there anything that this will affect the delay?
We've just been bubbling it for a while.
Okay.
We wanted to update it to reflect the 3 to 4 year things and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. That's a good thing. Well, we have a continuation meeting next Friday, correct? But we have to look at it by tomorrow, not the late for Sunday.
Yeah, I think it can wait.
I think next month.
Wait.
Wait till next month. I was just asking, I want to make sure we decide not to do this.
I have enough to do between now and tomorrow at 4:30.
Well, at this point, I guess I would move that we table this until next month and ask staff to get specifically the appropriate location to make reference to our policies and procedures in this agreement and identify it as such for next meeting.
Second.
So moved by Ms. Wick, seconded by Ms. Howe. Are there any opposed to tabling this until next month? Hearing none, we are so moved. Thank you. All right, our next item is the obligation report. Start.
Yes. It's the legal size paper you have for you. As every quarter, I'll just briefly recap what this is about. The list of projects is the list of projects that's in the current TIP. The first column, the purplish column, is what is in the draft TIP amendment number 3. It has not been approved yet. It's going to the assembly hopefully very soon. Craig, right?
Yes.
But for the purposes of obligations, we anticipate this will be the amount that we are targeting, so that's what we'll use for this report. The green column is what's been obligated so far, and then the blue is still what's left to be obligated, just to see where we are. There's nothing new to report or that's outside of the current TIP amendment that's outrageous. I will point out halfway down the sheet there, Dowling Road, TIP number project number 2, probably de-obligating about $3.8 million to reduce the low bid. We'll use that for other projects. The other projects on this page are all what's in the current TIP amendment number 3. So we'll go to the second page. At the top, there's a few more de-obligations for closed out projects that already went through. In the TE portion, halfway down, Muldoon Road, in the current TIP amendment, we thought we were going to have to add about $850,000 to that project. It turns out we're going to be de-obligating $275,000 to reflect another low bid. So that's another $1 million that we can use for TE. And it just so happens that the next project down, Glen Highway Trail Rehab, needs an extra $1 million. So in the current TIP, not TIP Amendment 3, we have $4.5 million. So in the TIP Amendment 3, we thought we needed more, so we raised it to 5.1. The current bid came back at $6 million. So we're going to ask this committee today to approve this amount so we can get this obligated sooner rather than later and get this going. So this will be the one item out of this obligation report that we'll be taking action on today, to go from the 4.5 million in the current TIP to the 6 million here listed in the obligation report. And this is due to an increased engineer's bid estimate as we move through the process. It's going through final certification now, and we're ready to get it out the door with this bid amount. Nothing else on this page to report. Some more de-obligations towards the bottom. Congestion mitigation air quality projects have pretty much all been obligated, except for the program section, which we're moving forward with. All the amounts seem to match up with what's in the TIP amendment, number 3. And then if you go to the 4th page, the red box in the middle, that's where we are today. We're about 7.44% off from being completely balanced. That's with all the DOBs and the anticipated obligations. So we're within the 10% window for the second quarter. And then everything else, nothing to report on the NHS system. The general funded projects that we had to obligate this year have already been obligated. You can see that's an additional $19.5 million to the AMATS program that comes outside of the AMATS allocation for projects in the AMATS area. So those are already obligated and moving forward. So with this report, we're just asking for approval to increase the Glen Highway Trail Rehab project from the amount that's in the current tip to the $6,600,203 that is in the obligation report.
6,000.
Thank you.
6,006,000.
$6,006,200. I generally speak in rounded terms.
I just have a question. If the other two actual bids came in lower, what generated the anticipated bid for the trail rehab to be projected to come in at $1 million more? Were there specific issues there?
I'm not sure specifically why.
Specifics, whether it's related to the bridge or chip grid, or just where the prices are coming into the quantities.
Is it based on engineer's estimate, or has it already gone out to bid?
No, it's engineer's estimate.
Engineer's estimate.
Certification.
So it still could come back lower.
Probably will.
Yeah. It's just easier to fix now than getting more money after we've obligated.
Ms. Epstein?
Question, Bart. So you said the Muldoon Road was about $1 million over. Do I get that by adding the 853 and the two?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did that and I got 1.1 million. And then the difference between the Glen Highway 5.1 million trail rehab and the bid number is 900,000. So it seems to me there's 200,000. For so long that Muldoon Road has been eating up all the TE money, and we haven't had money for other projects. It would be really nice to do more than just the existing trail rehab. So I'm hoping that
Right.
200,000.
Well, that went towards those other projects below, that Anchorage area-wide trails rehab and bicycle plan, that we already anticipated this overage, because those were from 2011 at $100,000 apiece, and we've added $165,000 to those through this current TIP amendment in anticipation of this Glen Highway Trail Rehab de-obligation. And then most likely, those projects are going to need more money this year as well. We just haven't got those final numbers back, but we're pretty confident that those will need more money and that we'll still meet our target for TE.
Okay, and pedestrian plan project implementation design, it's at 0 or?
Because it was obligated in 2011, so the $100,000 has already been obligated, and we've already started the RFP process for that.
Okay, thank you.
Whoever, did you?
Bart, so there, kind of following on Ken's question or comment, the bids are not in on Glen Highway, but if they're high and if they're more than 5.1, you can't award a contract because you don't have it. Because if they come in at 5.2,
Right.
you don't have it.
Right.
So you're estimating that maybe the high end, and if the bids come in favorable, then we can come back with another admin bond and move that money
Right.
down to one of the other projects.
Right.
Well,
If we're over our estimation, that money would come back to the other AMATS projects. It's just best to be a little high at this stage than low.
Okay. And what's the terminus on the Glen Highway one? Where's it go? What's the distance on that one? Where's it from and to? Do you remember? Glen Highway Trail?
It's from Muldoon to, I don't know the ending point.
It's just a Highland.
To Highland,
I
Jeff?
think
I
so.
think so.
It's past Highland.
Is it artillery?
18 miles long is what I recollect from reading the DSR.
Artillery?
I think it might be artillery.
It's past that.
Is it?
Today's construction.
It's 18 miles would be like up there north
Birchwood.
Birchwood. Yeah.
East Creek.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can pull it up here in a
Let's
second.
close now. Let's go. When? And I get to a close.
Okay. Thanks, Barb.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from the public? Then back to us.
Move to approve the increasing obligation for the highway trail rehab.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Howell, seconded by Mr. Whipple. Do I hear any opposed? Hearing none, we are so moved.
It's North Birchwood Loop is the endpoint.
Thank you, Bart.
It's 18 miles.
Is there any other business at this time? Or move on to informational? No? All right. Then we're moving on to the first informational item, which is going to be our 2035 update.
Yes, Madam Chair. Last Tuesday, the Assembly approved the 2035 MTP by a 7-2 vote. They have a number of amendments. There's about 16 of them. What we're asking is that we continue this meeting, of course, till the 20th in order to give you time to review the amendments. I put together a matrix of them with the Project Oversight Committee's recommendations. The Project Oversight Committee is recommending approval of all of the amendments. We find that they're very reasonable, and they make sense, and they add to the value of the plan. Doesn't, no reason not to recommend incorporating them into the final draft. Some of the major amendments involving project changes, very few. One is to take the Highland Road project and divide it up into 2 phases. Very similar to what the old or the existing Chugacki River Transportation Plan called for. One phase, which would be in the short term, is from milepost 2.2 to milepost 3.4, costing about $6.9 million. That would be put into the short-term list of roadway projects. The rest of the project, which goes out to 8.3 miles, would be in the long-term part of the plan. Currently, it's in the illustrative, so all that is moved into the financial constraint part of the plan. I think the other phase 2 is about 26 million, so altogether it's something like 30 million. In order to balance the financial plan aspect of this, the Assembly Chair, Debbie Osiander, recommended that we take out the South Birchwood Loop Road project. There's a lot of opposition to that project. There was some doubt about whether it could go through smoothly, and there was a lot of support for it. So it was pretty easy, I guess, for the chair to recommend moving that from the long-term to the illustrative. So you have a balance, one project for the other in Chugacki River. Both are basic reconstruction projects, no expansion of roadway capacities involved in that. So as a result, there's no real change in air quality conformity that's required. Nor do I think there's a requirement to go out for a new public review, since these are just basic reconstruction projects. One transit change was recommended involving additional bus service to Chugacki River. It's in the blueprint plan. It calls for restoring some of the old routes or local service in Chugacki River. I think it's Route 77, 78 was deleted from budget because of budget cuts a couple years ago. Blueprint plan for people who were said we need to restore that. So we added that on behalf of the chair of the Assembly back into the plan. The cost of that is, capital cost is $0, since the existing bus fleet can theoretically handle the additional service. So there's no change in the capital cost involving that additional service. The other changes are really mostly editing and to the plan, clarifications, that kind of thing. You'll see that in the matrix when you take a look at it. With respect to the ordinance that was approved, there was a substitute ordinance introduced a couple weeks ago by Assemblyperson Flynn, which added language which would restate the old firewall provisions that were included in the previous plan regarding expenditure of money for the Nick Arm Bridge over and above which is already allocated or already committed. And that was some discussion involved in that, but it was supported by the majority of the Assembly. So you'll see that also in the matrix that we're going to be handing out. I have a copy of the ordinance if you'd like to look at it beforehand, but it's here. Real quickly then, one other item which didn't really impact any of the projects list so much, but there was some discussion about the Spinard Road project, in both phases, from Hillcrest to Minnesota, particularly the impact of the proposed couplet, creating diversion of 36th and Spinard, which are currently 2-way streets, into a couplet, which was added on to the Spinard Rehabilitation Project in order to facilitate movement on Minnesota, in order to try to relieve the bottleneck at 36 in Minnesota. There's some discussion or some comments in public testimony as to what the impacts might be to the businesses there when you have a one-way couplet, and that always comes up when you start the converting couplets. It does impact businesses. So there was an amendment that required looking more intensely into the impacts of businesses. It didn't really change. It gave more flexibility to the scope of the project. It eliminated also the wording from that converted the street from 4 to 3 lanes, and just basically they said we're just going to try to improve traffic flow. Flexibility to the engineers, and they wanted to let the public process work itself out and come to some type of solution to the project without having it specified in the plan itself. So. Anyway, so all this information will be on the website under the agenda for the next meeting, so you can take a look at it. We are asking, though, that the TAC make a recommendation at the next meeting so we can forward that recommendation to the policy committee on May 3rd and meet our deadlines. You also see that there's the agenda item regarding the air quality conformity analysis or conformity report. I think originally it was on here for a business item, but we elected to go ahead and combine that with the approval of the plan itself and the conformity at the same time, because they're so tightly interwoven. And that'll be a double motion that you have to make at the next meeting. Go ahead with that. With respect to the air quality, the conformity report, the 30-day comment period is ended, and we have received no comments on the conformity report. The Air Quality Committee met April 2nd. They decided that they wanted to wait and see what the Assembly did at their meeting before making their final decision. So we rescheduled a teleconference with that committee for April 17th, next Tuesday. So you'll have their recommendation for your meeting on the 20th. I expect there'll be a few minor changes that they'll probably recommend at a minimum. Nothing of real substantial nature that I've heard so far, mostly technical edits, but we'll wait and see what they have to say when they meet Tuesday. Anyway, that's all I got.
That was kind of the 2035 update and the carbon monoxide and air quality conformity update as well.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments?
When we get to the point where we're recommending approval, we have to recommend it separately in the MTP and the conformity. We have to approve the conformity first, then the MTP recommendation. And policy has to approve air quality conformity first, then the MTP, because that's stated specifically in federal law.
Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public?
Ann Brooks again. I would just let the committee know that our intent is to post the document today or tomorrow, put it up on the web and send an email blast out so the public knows when your continuation meeting is and when the policy committee would act on the final.
Anything else? All right, we can move on to the next. We flip-flop item 6A and B, so now we're going on to the annual summary report from Mayor Foley.
Well, I've handed out the report that we prepared last fall, and hopefully most of you got a copy of that. I'll just give you the Reader's Digest version of that. Don't click here. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking to some of your backside.
Telling me I should move.
Sure. You got it, Steve. It's on.
Turn the lights off.
No, you can see the letters. Okay, I think any of you that attended the Citizens Air Quality Advisory Committee have already seen this, and I apologize to Lois and some others that are here, but I'll run through this quickly. Just going to give a quick status report on EPA criteria pollutants in Anchorage, and then also talk a little bit about benzene, which is not a criteria pollutant. These are the listing of criteria pollutants that EPA sets standards for that are valid across the country. Carbon monoxide, of course, has been a big issue in Anchorage for many, many years. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about particulate matter, the two versions, the big version, the big-sized one called PM10, and the smaller version called PM2.5. Talk a little bit about ozone, although it's not, you'll see it's not much of a problem here in Anchorage. And then a little bit about airborne lead, and then finally talk about air toxics, namely benzene. I'm not going to talk about two other criteria pollutants that are a problem in some parts of the country, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide. There's really not much concern about those pollutants here. Carbon monoxide, I'm sure most of you, not all, are familiar with this. It's a odorless gas produced by incomplete combustion. In Anchorage, about 79–80% of it is from motor vehicles, most of which is produced in the first few minutes after the engine is started cold. And we see our highest concentrations in the middle of winter, December, January typically, when we have strong days with strong temperature inversions. Typically those are days with clear skies, cold temperatures, and very little wind. And one thing that I think is a little unique to Anchorage is that we see the very highest concentrations in our residential areas because of this cold start issue. And that's why for years we've been pushing the Plug at 20 program, encouraging people to use block heaters. The trend is down. I sometimes joke that I started in 1980, and it's been improving ever since. But it's really pretty phenomenal.
I would use that.
It's been really quite phenomenal. I remember days where we would see, an 8-hour average of 20 parts per million, and now last year the highest value was I think 4.5 parts per million. So it's down dramatically. We haven't violated the standard since 1996. The standard set at 9 parts per million for an 8-hour average.
But we did exceed it my first year I was here, in 2001.
We did exceed it, but we did not violate it.
Right.
So, because you're allowed one exceedance per year.
Start your car.
But the trend is down and continues to be down. We think that the future is, modeling suggests that it's going to continue to go down, but not nearly as fast as it has been. Despite this dramatic drop, we still have some of the very highest carbon monoxide concentrations in the country. And this is literally, I don't think there are any other, except for a couple cities in the United States that have coking plants or some other stationary source. We have the highest, I think we have the highest concentrations of carbon monoxide in the country still, even though we haven't violated the standard. Fairbanks is a little bit lower, but we're not exactly sure where they're monitoring.
find that hard to
So, and a lot of these cities have temperature inversions. Desert cities like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and El Paso, they get these cold nights and they get these strong temperature inversions. Maybe not quite as strong as Fairbanks and Anchorage, but they get them nevertheless. I'm going to switch gears here to talk about PM10 and PM2.5. That's an EPA acronym for particulate matter less than 10 microns in diameter and particulate matter less than 2.5 microns. You can see the size of those particles relative to a human hair, the cross-section of human hair, pretty small particles. A PM10 particle is about the same size as a blood cell. They're linked with asthma and other respiratory problems. There's been a lot of work on PM2.5 around the country. That seems to be the greater concern, at least on a nationwide basis. They find that death rates in hospitals increase when PM2.5 is high. There are fewer studies that have looked at PM10. There's actually been a couple in Anchorage, one done quite a few years back by Dr. Gordian, used to work with the health department, and then later by Brad Gessner with Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. And they both showed that there was increase for doctor visits when our PM10 levels increase. So we think there are real impacts, and as you probably are aware, this is the time of year when the concentrations are the highest. PM10, and this slide's hard to see. We have occasional violations of the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, that's that NAAQS, NAAQS. In the spring, we've had we monitor at a site not very far from here on Tuna Road. Concentrations are pretty high today. In fact, I think they're the highest of the year so far. You might have seen some of the magnesium chloride that's being applied to the roads. There's some magnesium chloride on Tudor Road now. You see that kind of dark sections along the medians and shoulders, and that's put out there to suppress PM10 emissions and keep our concentrations relatively low. Eagle River used to regularly violate the air quality standard in the late 80s, and then roads were paved and the problem basically went away. One of the things that we're dealing with now with EPA is that we've had a number of exceedances of the PM10 standard that we are almost certain were caused by glacial river dust that was transported down from probably the Matanuska River, most likely. This is a satellite photograph of an event that occurred on September 24th, 2010, and I don't know if you can see the stream of dust coming out of the Susitna River there. There's a pretty substantial plume of dust coming down there, hitting Kenai Peninsula, and then it's a little bit less obvious, but you can see some kind of a more diffuse bit of dust coming out of the Matanuska River, hitting Anchorage, and we did exceed the standard on that day in both Anchorage and Eagle River. PM2.5, we're fortunate to have low concentrations in Anchorage. We were ranked the sixth cleanest city by the Lung Association in, I think, for 2011. There is some concern about that because Fairbanks has terrible problems with PM2.5 because of their fuel costs. They burn a lot of wood there. And so we are concerned that if natural gas prices spike, there may be a push to wood, and so we're kind of closely monitoring that. In fact, we do annual surveys to ask people how inclined they are to burn wood and that sort of thing, to see if we see any inclination to move away from natural gas to wood heating. We haven't seen that so far. The Assembly passed the outdoor wood boiler ordinance a couple of yeif ago that restricts any installations in Anchorage to those that are phase 2 certified to keep the emissions low. And we think that's going to help if there is a push towards wood heating. There's been no real trend either upward or downward in either PM10 or PM2.5. We're hoping to see that PM10 number start going down. We've used this mag chloride for a while, but I mean, we just have not seen a big impact on those concentrations so far. So we can continue working at that. And PM2.5 has been stable, but again, it's low right now, very low in Anchorage. I won't spend much time talking about ozone. Ozone's a big deal in the lower 48, especially big cities that are Atlanta, Milwaukee, Los Angeles. As you know, ozone is an essential part of the stratosphere, protects us and the rest of living things from ultraviolet radiation. But the ground level ozone is a big issue because it causes respiratory irritation, coughing, pain, medical issues, and most of the areas that seem to have the highest concentrations are areas that are immediately downwind of major urban centers in the lower 48. And one of the things that's interesting about ozone
Anchorage and Eagle River. The DEC is now monitoring ozone out in the Wasilla area. If you compare our concentrations with monitors in Denali National Park, the levels here are actually lower than they are in Denali National Park. And we think the reason of that is because the ozone is so reactive, it's reacting with our the pollutants in Anchorage and Eagle River, dropping out. We're seeing slightly lower levels in Anchorage and Eagle River than they do in Denali. I think almost all of it's natural. Airborne lead, we're monitoring out at Merrill Field because there's some concern about aviation fuel still containing lead in it, lead additive. We've been monitoring there since October. So far, we haven't seen anything very close to the standard. Looks like we're going to be under the standard. But again, we haven't seen the peak aviation season, so we'll continue monitoring. We're supposed to continue monitoring for a year there and see what we'll see. And I think the state is committed to monitor there if we're half the standard or higher to continue monitoring. But right now it looks pretty good. And finally, I talked just a little bit about benzene. The benzene in our gasoline we used to have about 5% benzene in the gasoline sold in Anchorage. Tesoro has put about I understand about $150 million into refinery modifications to reach the new EPA mandated level of 1.3%. So there's we're expecting about a 4-fold reduction in the benzene content in gasoline. According to Tesoro, that's already happened. So the gasoline now is the benzene content of gasoline is well lower than it was a couple of years ago. Phase 1, we monitored for a year to see what the levels were in East Anchorage, in an East Anchorage neighborhood, very close to where John Spring lives. And let me explain something. And then we hope to get money to monitor for another year here soon and compare what happens with the benzene concentrations. And here's just to give you an idea of how high they were. The top aerial photograph shows where our monitoring site is in East Anchorage. It's a residential area, kind of an older residential area in East Anchorage, pretty densely populated, but very residential, no real industrial sources, compared with a site that has essentially the same concentrations. That's in Galena Park, Texas, very close to Houston. You can see all the tank farms, very heavily industrial. I see the canal down there. You see the big tankers coming in. And the concentrations in our residential neighborhoods are about the same as they were in Galena Park, Texas in 2009. So we really have an issue with, or did have an issue with benzene and gasoline. So with that, I'm done. I guess summary, basically, CO is down. PM10 is unresolved problem. We're still concerned about that. PM25 is not a problem, but could pose a problem if Anchorage starts going to wood burning as a source of heat, and ozone levels are low. And benzene, we hope, is much better than it was a couple of years ago. So that's take some questions if you have any.
Steve, I know the answer to this, but I think it's interesting and people might want to know as well. What is your date of the highest PM10 typically at Anchorage?
Typical day?
No, the highest, the peak.
Which day is that?
Yeah, wasn't that the April 11th?
April 11th.
Yeah.
I know that because it's my birthday.
Oh. I thought of it as I was driving over here, because
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
see the haze towards the
Yeah, it's
mountain.
very much, it's like, unless it rains, it's almost always, this week is very, this week or next week, almost every year is the period we have highest PM10 level.
So what you're saying is we need more snow. No, I'm kidding.
You have monitors south of the airport. I'm curious about the data from the airport. That there have been considerable complaints and comments from people that live in the community and
As far as the odors and stuff from the airport? You're talking about Ted Stevens Airport?
Yeah.
Back in 2005, we did a study. I mean, and I live very close there. I smell, there's no question that there's odors from the airport. But we did a study where we were monitoring for volatile organic compounds during the course of the winter. And we tried to correlate, in fact, we were ready to deploy these canisters when we got complaints to see if we could see any evidence of at least volatile organic compounds associated with these complaints. And what we found is that the levels of benzene, toluene, xylene, that sort of thing, are lower there than most parts of Anchorage. I mean, there's less activity, there's less motor vehicle activity. I think that's the primary source of those pollutants. We may have been monitoring for the wrong things. I mean, some of those odorous compounds may not be captured by the things that we're sampling, but it's kind of an unresolved problem. There have been similar studies done in other airports, SeaTac, for example, years ago. I don't know if any of them have really pinned things down and figured it out. Thank you.
Steve, do you have any information on benzene accumulating inside of garages and seeping into homes?
Well, that's the other side of this. They didn't talk about the indoor side. In fact, when we did this phase 1 of the outdoor study, we did a complementary indoor study where we looked at 60 houses. And the concentrations in the houses, in some cases, are 30 to 50 times higher than they are outside, depending on what people store in their garages.
So what does that mean? I mean, what advice do you give to people? What are the effects?
Well, we have, and DEC's run commercials advising people not to store gasoline or gasoline engines in their garage.
But just, I mean,
Yeah.
just driving your car, turning the car on something.
Well, interestingly, we didn't find that cars were the source.
Oh, really?
In the most case, I mean, cars now have so many good vapor controls on them that they don't seem to be. It's the snow machines, the chainsaws, the spilled lawnmowers, that spilled. People that one of the worst things you can probably do is fill your snowblower up with gasoline in the garage and then shut it. I mean, that's it. You're going to get a big spike. Yeah.
I guess I better stop then.
Explains a lot about
Shades?
All that stuff.
I'm not doing it, but I'll move out of dark neighborhood.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or Lance?
All right.
I know, happy birthday then. It was yesterday. Happy birthday.
You want us to sing?
No.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think the agenda says an update on our route rescheduling. I'll talk a little bit about our routing, but we don't have any significant plans to reroute or reschedule our buses for the next year. We are doing some tweaks, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I kind of want to talk about basically what we've been doing over the last year and some of the things that we've done to get there, and the one large thing that we're going to be doing in our future. We've got a lot of things planned, but I want to talk about those as well. So some of the things that have been going on since we've talked since we had a presentation last time is probably the thing that I am, as the director, most interested in is our on-time performance. And when we look at on-time performance on the bus world, it means when you look at that printed schedule and it says it's going to be there at 7:07, if it's 7:08, it's still considered on time. If it's after 5 minutes, it's considered late. So we provide over 4 million trips a year, and in the last calendar year, 2011, 71%, a little more than 71% of all of our trips in the entire year were considered on time, which means within 5 minutes. And that takes into account the weather that we had this year. It takes into account any deviations we may have for construction. It takes into account accidents, tours, parades. So it's basically how well we're doing. And as far as I'm concerned, 71% is not good enough. So our anchor rides, it's a little bit different. That is measured on a 15-minute window interval. We look at that one as being on time about 90 or 90% of the time. Given the fact that with all of the weather conditions and days when we don't run service, if we cancel service, we still count that as part of our record. We don't take it out. So if we're running service on a day and we decide just to stop running buses like we did one day this year, we still count that in as service we could have provided. So it's a lot better. In the last 6 weeks, since we've made some adjustments and the weather's getting better, we're between 84 and 86% on time on every run we're doing all across Anchorage. So that's getting better. Some of the other things, if you look at the overall ridership, our ridership between 10 and 11 has gone up about 31,000 passenger trips. They're not all on transit. A pretty small portion of those were on transit. The largest increase, frankly, has been on the van pool program. We've been almost 30,000 or 28,000 of that 31,000 were passenger trips we provided in the van pool program. So our van pool program is really going up. But overall, the entire ridership for in that 2011 period, it's continuing to rise. Interesting enough, our sales are going up, and you can buy a pass or a service on either the van pool or primarily on the buses through the internet, and our online sales are going up quite a bit. Our advertising revenues, we are getting asked to wrap more and more buses. So it's kind of a fine line between we're not charging enough or they're just very popular. We're not going to wrap more than probably 15% of our fleet, because frankly we start to lose our image, but we've got people lined up that want to wrap the buses. So we're going to have 2 that are going to open this week, the ones for Northern Bank and the others for the Covenant House that will occur next week. So
By wrapping, you mean the advertising on it?
yeah. And
The
because
full
Covenant
bus
House is-
colors?
Right, where we wrap it, you see the subway and the UAA. So we charge $30,000 to wrap for doing it, and we charge $5,000 to put it on. So we've actually had to amend our contract to do more, so people like it. Some of the other things that we've been doing to improve our service is we've been making some technological changes at our bus stops. In the bottom left-hand corner there, we've got on-time message boards. This one here is at Muldoon and DeBar. We've put some at the university. We've got some at Providence, and obviously we've got one downtown in the Diamond Center. This is kind of it's a lesson learned and a good and bad thing. People don't need to look at the schedules anymore. They look at the board. And the way the board works is that it's connected to the AVL on the bus. And so if the last data point for the AVL was like 3 miles away, and it'll adjust for the time, but if they happen to pick up speed, it'll show up before that. So we're making adjustments to, and it's only happened once, but when it happened downtown. And it was 2 minutes off. And somebody was looking at it and said, looks like the bus is going to be here at let's just use that number, 7:24. And the schedule said 7:22. They showed up on time. They showed up at 7. The bus driver showed up at 7:20. They left at 7:22, and that didn't change. So basically, the airline left on time, but the message board was behind schedule, so we made some adjustments there. People love it. I mean, they don't even look at the schedules anymore. The bottom center one, the method in which we track it, it's basically a financing advancement for dealing with credit cards. The way we have to do it now, it's just brutally arcane. It's a
little black box?
It's literally the black box. And then in the top right, we buy this bus here is actually a picture of one of our buses in production down in St. Paul from last July. We just got 8 in, and we'll do a next purchase next year. So these are, again, what they've done on that little box on the top is they've moved basically the heating and air conditioning from the back of the bus near the engine to the top of the bus, which provides a lot more seats. So some of the things that we've been doing inside our own house to make things different. We've got a lot of new turnover inside the department. New superintendent, new foreman. I've been there for about a year. We've also got a new slew of drivers. We've had some, how do I say that? We've had some drivers that weren't playing as well as we wanted to, and they found different employment. So when we did our first round of interviews for bus drivers, I was involved in that, and so was some of as was the superintendent. Because frankly, our bus drivers, they're 95 people, and they are our customer service. They are our front counter. No one knows what we do in that third floor building, but 15,000 people a day meet those 95 drivers. So when their customer service is bad, I know about it. And occasionally I find myself on Channel 2 News, which I do not like for that purpose. The other perspective is that we're taking a different and more ownership of everything that goes on. There's a lot of things that have been working where the drivers really don't know what's going on in the planning section, and the customer service doesn't know what's going on in maintenance. And so they now have an appreciation of it, and I think everyone understands what everyone else is doing. Our budget, we in the municipality and those municipal agencies can appreciate this. I mean, this is a tough thing to do, but I'm really proud of the department itself. We are on budget. The thing that's really hard for us right now is fuel. Our fuel budget is $1.6 million, and we had to ask for $500,000 more last year just to meet the fuel. And this year, we just put in another $400,000 for fuel. So we are sucking up the gas. And we're not always getting more money. We're told to suck it up. So the other thing we've been doing is kind of looking inside about what is the most important thing that we need to be doing. Our internal, external communication, and what's our succession plan. When Gary left and our foreman left, and we had some drivers leave, we lost probably 150 years worth of service and experience in about a 30-day period, about a 3-month period. So, and everyone was freaking out, and I'm going, that's not a bad thing. I mean, and I think the crew has picked it up. Choice riders, interesting, when we talk to our drivers about one of the things we want to do is pick up new choice riders. Interesting, from our business, you would think a choice rider is somebody that has a choice to drive. When the bus drivers saw that, they thought it was insulting. They said, choice rider is someone who doesn't have a choice. So education to our own drivers about what we as transportation professionals look at as a choice rider, as someone who could drive. And then frankly, our customer service and our image. I hammer this home with our bus drivers. If they're not clean, our bus stops are not well kept, if they're not polite, if they're not being good customer service, we can't provide a good service. So I really hammer that one home. I will touch on a couple things. Our site enhancement crew this year, the top left is a bus bench that had an avalanche on it. The one on the other side is where they dig it out. They do all this stuff by hand. I mean, they dig it out by hand. The one in the bottom, what they're doing is they're sawing the ice out. It's about 1 foot thick because the bus shelter that's to the right that you can't see is 1 foot lower than the ground. So they were cutting the ice out so people could step out of the shelter to get to the bus stop. These guys really worked hard this year, and all the snow removal crews had their own issues, but these guys really put it together. On the safety and enhancement measures and some of the cameras, you probably do know that we've installed security cameras at the downtown transit center. We've got, I think, 30 of them. We actually have audio with them. And from my office, if I want to, I can press a button and talk to the individual who's standing on the corner. I haven't used the feature yet. We've also made the cameras available to APD and dispatch, but we looked at one of the things that we had a lot of complaints about. We had probably top 10 spots where our customers were either, they didn't feel safe or they didn't feel comfortable, so we got that list. We talked to APD and find out what we could do. So now we do have cameras at the Muldoon station, the Benny Benson station, and at Mountain View and Burgaw. So those are also tied into APD. So if we get calls or concerns, if somebody's on the phone and they say, we just look right on the camera right now. The other thing we do is we have undercover cops on the bus. On about 4 of our routes, they ride at random. Originally, they were in uniform, and everyone was well behaved. But then they did it just kind of on a fly, undercover, and they didn't do anything, but they said this is an incredibly target-rich environment on a couple routes. So what they do is they have a car that's been following our buses, and the word is now getting out because that kind of activity in our buses is going down fast. What happens is the cops just watch the individual, they get off the bus, the cops get off with them, and then they arrest them at the bus stop, and an undercover car comes by and picks them and hauls them to jail. So,
Like drug dealing or what?
yeah, soliciting. We don't arrest them for drinking a soda on the bus, or open containers. We'll just kick them off the bus. There's not very many incidences that happen. It was a rash at the beginning, but I'm telling you, it's a new day. It's a new day on the Route 45. So,
Anchorage CSI.
So it's and the cops love it. It's almost like a gift. It's almost too easy for them. So and it's unfortunate that we had to do it, but the fact of the matter is that I think the message is out and people are stepping it up. So it's a big difference. So I think the one thing I just want to point out at the end, this year, starting in July, I provided a copy of a monthly newsletter that we put together in the department. It kind of shares some of the activities that we're doing, and this one here highlights our new fare box system. We are putting in a new fare box system beginning in June. I think it's in June it's going to go on. And the way that, so basically, the way that you ride our bus and our fare collection, and I can share this now because we're going to change it, but if you took a piece of paper like this and you cut it out the same size as a dollar bill and you slid it in our machine, it wouldn't know the difference if it was that or a 5 or a 20 or a 1. It would just see that the dimension's the same. Our bus drivers can call them on it, but the bus drivers do get busy. Not so much anymore. So the other thing that we're doing is we're getting rid of tokens and we're creating tickets. And I won't explain the whole thing, but basically we're bringing our fare system to a little more state-of-the-art. And I think Gary in Portland, you may recognize something similar to this, but we're going to have like a municipal ID card or a ConocoPhillips card. They have that card with a swipe bar on it. They just walk in and they can wave it. They have 3 ways to do it on this box. You can slide a card in, you can tap the card on it, or you can scan it in. And you can buy day passes right on the bus. You don't have to do it at the counter. So really excited about this one. You can buy a 20-day pass right at any 20 days. Right now, you have to do them consecutive. So if a tourist comes to town and wants to buy a 20-day pass, they're here for 3 weeks, they can use it Monday, they can use it twice on Tuesday, and they can just random around. So this one here is going to be good. We'll have our own on-site kiosk right in the transit center, probably one of the Diamond Center. People can buy their stuff right there without having to go. They can do it online and do it right there. So a lot of other things that will be that the department's working on. But those are some of the highlights that our business is good. So that's it. Any questions?
We heard at the Northeast Community Council that there might be a change from the Muldoon Mall to the Takatna Commons for the sort of the transit center.
Yes, we will be looking into whether or not we want to move a primary hub for the long term out to Takatnu. We would still use the facilities that we have at DeBar and Muldoon because they're very well used. If that mall grows, when traffic starts to increase between Anchorage and Eagle River, that location could serve as a hub. Also, the retail out there for people that are working, and the VA is really getting to be a growing clientele for us right now. We only have one run, so we're looking at it. We still will have service out at DeBar and Muldoon.
And it needs to be looked at, I think, as potentially a access point to, the only access point that's really convenient for J-Bear. Because it's the closest gate you have to a bus stop.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
And there is a lot of hospital traffic too, as well as, I mean, I know the van usage has increased a whole lot. It increased by about 10 vans out to J-Bear this past 2 years, I think. And so I know there's an interest in it, and I think there'd be an interest in transit as opposed to van pooling if it were available.
Yeah, the reason we don't run a bus on base is just...
I know all the reasons,
security.
but I think there's ways to overcome that if you could just simply get people to a gate and show that there's a desire, because right now if you take the bus and you get to Government Hill Gate or you get to the Muldoon Gate, you have to call the Y and they come and pick you up on an individual basis. This is not energy efficient. This is not a wise use of that commuter tax dollar that you can get paid for. And that's why a lot of the people are using the vans, because you get that $130 and it doesn't come out of your pocket, and it pays for your transportation. So there's a lot of people out there that would be willing to use more and more of that, and the best way to get more and more of that is transit, because there's only so many vans you're going to be able to utilize eventually.
No, I mean, the base, J-Bear itself, but the mall, that's just going to be hot. The other thing we're doing is we've got some plans to redo some work out at the Diamond Center. So,
Well, I've had a question on the van pool increase in ridership. Do you have enough vans, so you have enough funding, do you have enough money to continue to support the increased use of the vans? And predominantly, where are they going?
So, Jerry, if I can remember, serves me, last we had 66 vans. 61 of them are between here and the valley. 2 of them go to Girdwood, and the others, whatever the balance is, goes to Jay Bear, just particularly for the van pool program. The anchor rides is different.
So that increase for the, is it the valley that's predominantly increased in the usage?
Any other questions? Comments? I think that was the last informational report. Are there any other, any comments to go to the order before we continue? No? All right, then our next scheduled meeting, we will continue this meeting until next Friday, April 20th at 2 p.m. And is that here?
It is here.
Okay.
Will you go finish?
Yeah, sorry, I missed my window. But Bart and I had a conversation at the last meeting when it was only tentative that it be on the 20th, and I had let him know I'm out of town on next Thursday night, following Thursday night. So I was hoping that maybe somehow we'd get another opportunity to fill out a schedule and see whether it can be moved.
Well, the problem is if the policy committee is meeting on the 3rd, we have to have any decision made 7 days in advance. And if you're gone the 19th to the 26th, we wouldn't be able to schedule something to actually get it all done.
There's no other time next week.
Well, we're getting into the ethics committee, that's me in time with their approval. The June timeframe is.
Well, I'm just wondering earlier in the week, not later.
Well, then we don't have 7 days.
What will?
We won't.
We need 7 days from today
Oh,
for the TAC to meet, because you don't have the documents yet.
okay.
So in order for you to have it a week in advance, that leaves us at least next Thursday. I don't remember what Thursday would work. I know we did the doodle poll. And
Yeah, I mean, I was not involved in the scheduling. I
Yeah,
let
I-
Craig know of your conflict, but I don't set the meeting scheduling.
Is there any way you can hang up by phone or telephone?
Definitely not the time we have scheduled.
The 2 o'clock.
Right. It's a big one here.
Oh, you better not do that.
Would be popular.
Oh, okay, I just the way she
Oh,
was
do we?
heading with like closing the meeting, I want to make sure.
My question was, if you could get it done between 2 and 4 on Friday?
I think there's, yeah, I mean, the stuff that came out of both P and Z and the Assembly were pretty minor stuff. Nothing really, I mean, P and Z made some findings, but they had no changes, they had no amendments. They
Had
just-
no word changes.
No word changes at all. The Assembly were just a few. It took them 4 meetings, but. they didn't do it.
The only possibility would be if we did it after Friday, but before the following Wednesday or Thursday. And that's if we were doodled and then you could tie in, but I don't know what, after the legislature is over, my schedule's long. Good year. If the committee wants to do that, we could check it out. We'd have to doodle.
Right, and I should, before everybody gets involved, if it's not a time for flying, it's personal and then work related that I'm out of state. It may not be possible for me, so we might want to just keep the time.
What actually is on our agenda for next week? Other than what we do?
That's it.
The air quality.
And then your final recommendation. Long road is almost over.
not having the regular meeting of the policy committee in April, and we're the 26th. Instead, we're having it on the 3rd, May 3rd.
Okay, yeah, and our next meeting is then May 10th, our next formal meeting. Okay.
Madam Chair, I move we continue this meeting until April 20th, 2 o'clock in this room. And I would ask that, Craig, if you could visit with Lois to see, maybe there's a time later in the day, we start a little later, doodle it so that she might have an opportunity to give it one more shot. If there's a time that can work for her. I don't know, Lois, what your schedule is, so maybe Craig knows what all our availability is, so.
Thanks.